All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Dad Designer podcast. Today, I'm joined by the guest, Todd Wikle. Hey, Todd, welcome to the show.
What's up, man? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for being here. And why don't you tell folks a little bit about what you do for a living as a designer and where you're from and a little bit about your family?
Yeah, man. Yes, I'm from just right outside of Asheville, North Carolina. I've been a graphic designer for 4 years, and I've been a husband for almost 11 years and a dad for almost 2 years. Currently, my full time job, I'm the in house graphic and web designer for a company called Ultrastar, and I also freelance in any spare time that I have, and that's going really well. And yeah, that about sums me up right now, man. Our little boy's almost 2, and so my life is work and then dad and then sleep, repeat. It's really all we do right now.
Yeah, for sure. And we were connected by a guest, Caleb White,
Oh yeah.
who you mentioned before we hit record that y'all know some of the same people because you grew up in the same area and he now lives there. But what's that connection?
Yeah. So we connected, like, I've connected with almost everybody else that I know in this design world. We just connected online, and you just follow each other, like each other's work. And then we chatted one day. It was right after the big hurricane came through Asheville. He actually reached out to me just to see if there was anything that he could do to help. So he's a super great guy. But yeah, he lives now where I grew up, and we're just chatting one day, and he knows a few people that I know, and I've never met him in person, but like a a soft meeting on the books as soon as we can. We'll go out, we'll have lunch or something. So he's been a great friend for the last couple of months. He's a great guy.
Nice, nice. Yeah, and you mentioned the hurricane. I know I have a bunch of friends down in that area of Western North Carolina. How are you all doing?
Mhm. Man, we're doing good, man. The hurricane was a weird experience for us because we live on like the outskirts of Asheville, and so like we set our alarm for like 5 a.m. because that's when it was supposed to roll through real bad, and we were going to wake up. If the wind was real, because we live on top of a mountain, and so if the wind was real bad, we were gonna grab Jack, kind of bring him to bed with us, just to kind of be as safe as we could, right? We woke up at 5 a.m. and there was almost no wind. It was barely sprinkling, and we're like, okay, cool. We went back to bed. Woke up a couple hours later, same thing. It just wasn't bad. It wasn't until we turned on the news that we saw all this devastation in Asheville, and then on the other side of us, the city, it's a little town on the other side of us, they completely flooded. So we were just right in this perfect little area that didn't flood. And the only thing that really happened to us is we lost cell service for 3 days. So we lived like it was the 90s, for for 3 days. And it wasn't half bad. But I mean, but like it just like but the bad part was just that, like our friends and businesses and seeing everybody that was affected. I mean, the last time I went downtown Asheville, it was for a client meeting, and the way they're kind of getting by, at least back then, it was been a couple months, but what they brought in these giant water silos because the both water mains in Asheville were destroyed. So there was there's not drinkable water in Asheville. So they have these silos set up all throughout the city for businesses to use to pump clean water in so that they can open their doors and operate and stuff. So it was really tragic, man. A lot of people lost complete buildings. Like there were a few places that my wife and I would frequent for lunch and stuff, and it's just gone. Just whole sections are gone. I have friends that lost clients, and it was a lot. But like Asheville and a lot of parts of North Carolina do, we're resilient and everyone's pitching in, helping each other, and it's been really cool to see that side of it. But we were very blessed for our house, for our property. We didn't experience really any setback at all. So that was nice for us,
Yeah, yeah.
for sure.
Wow. Yeah, that's wild. One of the things you mentioned is that you work full time for a company. Are you
Mhm.
remote?
No, no. So I'm not remote. So I'm in my office right now.
Okay.
We're a third party company actually in the casino in Cherokee, North Carolina. So I come in, I have my own little private office. It's really the side of like the size of a closet. So I call it my closet. It's really, it's nice and cozy and cramped. But but no, I'm full time in house, which is great. Jack was born in May of 2023, and he was actually born on the same day that I signed a contract with my first design job, which was Piedmont Brand Company. Shout out Brad in Piedmont. And I worked from home for the first 9, 10 months, if I'm remembering that right. And working from home was great in the sense of, oh, cool, I'm home around my family all the time. But it was awful, awful in the sense of, okay, I have a baby that's behind because my office was like off my living room. So like my wife is just a trooper, like, no, no, I got him. It's fine. You have to work. It's all good. And I'm just like eaten up with guilt. And it was every day. I would work until I couldn't stand it, and I would just get up. I'm like, all right, come here. I'm helping this and that. Like I just couldn't, work with a screaming baby behind me all the time, which without feeling guilty for it. So, but I
Right.
mean, there was some good times too. I'd take a break for lunch, and that'd be right around his nap time, so I'd get to go rock him to sleep. And so that kind of stuff was good. But it was just every dad I've talked to that's tried to work from home in that kind of situation, it's just, oh yeah, the guilt is unbelievable. Your wife's covered in puke and who knows what else, and you're just sitting in your little office drawing your little pictures. it's just it's oh yeah, it was a lot. It was a big shift from the life we lived before that.
Yeah, that's so true.
Yeah.
A lot of people have asked, like, well, isn't it the screaming that's distracting, or like, all that kind of stuff? I'm like, no, the screaming's not distracting in the sense that the baby's screaming. The screaming's
Yeah.
distracting in the sense that I have this great desire to want to go help, and
Yes.
I'm either on a call or I'm, in the
Hmm.
middle of something, and I just feel bad that I can't do that.
Yeah, yeah, and it's exactly how it is. You just, I mean, like I said, it's our first, so we had never been parents before. So I mean, like the first few months like, after he was born, every time he would cry, it's just like it would just rip your heart out. And people were telling us, it's okay, they cry, it's okay, they cry, and we're like, I know, but we're not sleeping, so everything is magnified. And it was whew, man, it was a time. But at the same time, it was also fun. I mean, he took so many naps on my chest. It was so great. He fit between, like my nipples and my chin. That's how small he used to be. It was so great.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
I miss those days. I was hugging my daughter yesterday, and we're standing up. She came over and hugged me, and the top of her head is now like here,
Oh no.
and I'm just like, wow,
Yeah.
she's so
Just
big.
oh, I know. It's like every time we size him up and close, and I'm like, he's not gonna get this big. He cannot be this big this fast. It's insane. It's awful. I mean, I was one of your guests. I forget who. He said something like, and it really resonated. I watched it today. He was like, "Yeah, man, the hours are long, but the years go by fast." And I was like, "Oh, that's not the most true thing I've ever
Yeah,
heard about parenting so far. It's absolutely
yeah,
true."
yeah, yeah, for sure. Well, the other thing I want to talk a little bit about too is your work. You mentioned you're full time, but you have a bunch of freelance stuff,
Oh
and
yeah.
there's a couple projects that I want to talk about. You mentioned you recently rebranded your local coffee shop. By the
Hmm.
time this launches, it'll be public. So we can talk about it and show it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for
Yeah. Tell
sure.
us a little bit about that.
Yeah, man. So a few years ago, so it's a weird place to start this, but so a few years ago, I was introduced to the concept of minimalism, and I love it. I wear a black T-shirt every single day. And back then, I started wearing my favorite T-shirt. I bought like 10 of just the same shirt, right? So we started loving minimalism, and like I already loved coffee, so like that coffee and minimalism, like this isn't unique to anyone. You YouTube coffee, and it's gonna be that same white walls, wood aesthetic, coffee aesthetic. It's just it's not unique to anybody, right? So I fell real quick into that like minimalist coffee aesthetic, right? Well, right around that time, a coffee shop opened up in our little town called White Moon, and I walked in and I was like, oh. I'm home, like what is this place? Because we live in a small town outside of Asheville. There's just not a lot here, but we are blessed with some of the best places to eat. I mean, it's insane. And one of these places is White Moon. And so we walk in, and immediately, the food is just top tier. The coffee is top tier. The people are just great people. So I, we we have never looked up how much money we spent there. And we never will, because I'm not going to do that to myself. But I've spent so much time there, and I got to know the previous owners, and then when they sold it to the new owners, I already knew them because they worked there. And so it was a nice little transition. And then one of the baristas that I was friends with mentioned, because I guess they were talking about maybe updating their logo and stuff. She goes, "Oh well, Todd, he's a graphic designer. He's in here all the time. I'm sure he'd do it for you." And when they asked me to do it, I kept it together on the outside, but on the inside, I was like, "You have got to be kidding me! Like this is actually happening." And so I struggled and struggled and struggled with that logo for a long time, because it was the first logo that I had ever done where we're not completely overhauling it, so it's not really a rebrand. It's the same name, it's the same feel, but but it's that brand, that logo, and that business had garnered so much respect in the community. Like people love this place, and so now I'm thinking to myself like, okay, don't kill your coffee shop. Like just I can't be the reason that this place flops, right? It's just all this kind of pressure on myself. And the crazy thing about this whole process was they wanted to get away from their old hand drawn looking logo to a newer, circular, more like perfectly circular vectorized, logo. And so that's the direction we went for a long time. And even the discovery meeting that we had at first was very like, yes, like we're leaning more modern, more perfect, more vectorized, that kind of aesthetic. So I'm plugging away at this project, and I keep noticing that inside the coffee shop they're making changes that isn't who they said they were in the brief. And what was happening, and hindsight is 2020, so I can look back now and figure out what was happening. What's happening is they were figuring out who their identity was as the new owners of this coffee shop, and they're definitely more eclectic. Like this place used to be bare bones, white walls, wooden furniture, real minimal. Now they have a mural of like bright green and blue like forest inside. It's completely different. So they're definitely more eclectic, not tacky, but just a little more eclectic. And so as they're making these changes, I'm talking to my wife, and I'm like, I think we might need to start over. This isn't what they said, who they said they were at all. And the version of the logo that I gave them that I liked the most, the owner actually said, "Could we see this in like a hand drawn version?" Which my immediate reaction was, "You said you don't want to do that." I didn't reply that, but I was thinking like, "You said you don't want to do that." I'm like, "All right, fine." So I threw it, in Procreate, did a hand drawn version, and I was like, "I love this. I think this looks better than it used to." I sent it off to them, and they loved it too. And now they have this awesome like hand drawn field logo. And what it is the name of the coffee shop is White Moon. They have a cocktail bar called Dark Moon, and they wanted one logo that combined both logos. And then when they wanted to do separate things like coffee sleeves or wine bags or whatever, they could split it apart and they could use it for one for each. And so this was a kind of a big I had to figure out how to combine these logos, then take them apart, and it was a big project. I ended up finishing it. They loved it. They rolled it out. I want to say the first of the year, and the community response has just been, thankfully, just everyone loves it. And one of the owners, Jill, she actually told me something that I love. She said exactly what we were hoping for is happening. There's an equal amount of people that notice it and love it, and people that don't notice it at all. And I'm like, perfect. It's exactly where we want to be. We don't want to have a Tropicana situation where they change everything and now all of a sudden sales plummet. We want to stay away from that. So, but no, it was a great project, and people were liking it. My wife saw this couple wearing some merch walking down the road. She stopped and she's like, "Can I take your picture?" And she sent me a picture of them wearing it. So it's been a lot of fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Did you mention that like you've only been designing professionally for 4 years?
Yeah.
This like what were you doing before that?
Yeah. So so before that, I went to school to be a youth pastor, and I loved being a youth pastor. It was so much fun. My wife and I both we grew up in churches that weren't very healthy. I was very blessed to have parents that were very, you know, I would say balanced people. And so I ended up working with kids, a lot in college, and pursued that. And man, I loved being a youth pastor, just being as balanced as I could. And part of that job was again, the city that job was in is a very poor part of North Carolina, and so a lot of my job was, taking care of kids that didn't have anything. Like a good friend of mine, Steve, he owned a coffee shop back then, in that city, and what he would do is at the end of the night, he would actually let these kids that had nowhere to go sleep inside the coffee shop because it was raining or cold or hot or whatever. He just, he couldn't just let them sleep outside. He'd open the door and let them sleep inside. And when he'd open, they'd get up and go do whatever they had to do. But this was the norm for where we lived. And so we were constantly working with homeless youth and stuff like that. And so a lot of my job as a youth pastor was, it was just caring for people, making sure they had a place to sleep, food to eat. I had one kid in my youth group whose parents were just abusive. I'll spare you the story, but like I worked with local PD to get his dad arrested because he was coming back into town and the kid was scared for his life. I mean, it was like he called me and didn't know what to do. And I was like, we'll take care of this. I knew a few of the police officers and they got it handled. And then he went to a great home. And as far as I know, he's doing really well now. But that's kind of how it started. And then that led into me actually working for a group home. I worked in a group home for a long time, ended up being the assistant director of it, and just kind of between being a youth pastor and working in that social work kind of field, I was constantly doing things like making logos and building websites and making posters and stuff like that. And eventually I just, I thought I kind of want to do this full time. And someone told me that I didn't have to go back to school for it. I just have to have a good portfolio and be able to do what I said I can do. And long story short, I met Brad at Piedmont, went to lunch with him, and a few months later, he asked me if I'd ever consider switching careers and working with him. And that was the quickest I've ever responded to a text. The social work is a rewarding job, air quotes, but man, it's half the job is dealing with the government and burnout social workers, and even just the stories that come along with those kids themselves, man, like it'll burn you out real fast. And so I made that switch and I've loved it ever since, man. My wife and I constantly talk about how much happier we are doing
Mm.
what we're doing now, man. She's a stay-at-home mom. She was a teacher. She loves staying home more than she ever loved teaching. Which, effectively half our income was gone when she decided to stay home. But my gosh, we have never been happier. It's incredible. It's so much fun. So yeah, I did social work type stuff for about a decade before I became a designer.
Got it. Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
great story. And then, I mean, you've had some success in that short amount of time, even being on Will Patterson's
Yeah.
logo battle. I mean,
That was fun.
I've
Yeah.
seen him, like I know of him. I'm
Mhm.
not one of his like loyal followers, but how did
Sure.
that story come to be?
Yeah, if you haven't seen it, go watch it. But yeah, I'm going to tell you how it ends. But no, so that story came to be exactly what we were talking about before you hit record. You were talking about something that you were kind of thinking about doing. I said you never know. This was a never know situation. I saw them put out on socials, hey, we're wanting to try something new for a series. If you're interested, send us how much you charge for a logo and send us your portfolio. And I sent it off, and I mean, he's got just shy of 1 million subscribers. So I'm like, the chances of getting picked for this is, next to none. And so I sent it off. And when I clicked send, I was like I didn't feel excited. I was just like, okay, we'll see what happens. But there's no way there's no way I'm getting picked. I got an email back from their office person, and they're like, "Hey, we've got you on a short list for one of the later series." And I'm like, "Oh, okay. That's just like you. Thanks for applying. We'll keep you in mind. If you ever applied for a job, we'll keep your application on file, kind of thing." And I was like, "Oh, okay, cool, whatever." So I'm actually playing in a golf tournament for 2 days, and we're teeing off on like the fourth hole, and I get an email, and it was like, "Hey, can you meet tomorrow? We want to have you on the show." And I freaked out, like in the golf cart. I was like, "No freaking way!" And yeah, we ended up meeting with them and had that initial call, and yeah, it was a really good experience. I mean, literally we met on a Wednesday, he gave us the brief and he said, all right, we'll see you next Wednesday. So I had a week to make this logo. But if you watch the earlier shows, even like dealing with a client, you're not just going to say, okay, here's your logo, what do you think? You know, you're no, you're gonna come up with the visual system and mock-ups and stuff like that. And so I put all my other clients on hold for a whole week, and I was like, listen, I'm treating this like a job interview. If someone watches this, if a design agency or a client watches this, like I want this to be like a good look into my process and a good look into how I work and the work that I can do. And so, and that's, so far it's been, you know, pretty well received. I won the challenge, so that was a lot of fun. Jada did a great job. The and yeah, the whole experience was a lot of fun. And they not only paid me my actual rate, they also, I got a $100 gift card for winning, and that paid for my brand new Keychron keyboard. So yeah, you know, good stuff all around.
Nice. That's cool. That's cool. I'm glad you went for it, and yeah, it turned out good, and then you have a portfolio piece and a cool story.
Oh yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
but while I was perusing your site, I came across the Soggy Bottom Boys, and I was like, "This can't be the same Soggy Bottom Boys that I know
Oh
and am
yes.
thinking of." And sure enough,
Oh
it
yes.
was the same Soggy Bottom Boys that I
Oh
knew
man.
and was thinking of.
Oh yeah, man. That was, gosh, that I think it still is my favorite logo that I've ever done, and that's my dad's sense of humor coming out in me, man. Like my dad, he literally sent me something yesterday, but just, you know, my whole life, my dad has just been this effortlessly funny guy. I mean, he'll have a stupid idea in his brain and he'll draw it, and like he has his own style of drawing. It's so funny. I mean, like I remember I was grabbing or breakfast with him a year or two ago, and I was asking him about these drawings, and he pulls out a wad out of his wallet of just receipts. And he's like, "Oh, he said, yeah, I still do that all the time." And I'm in this restaurant crying, laughing, flipping through these receipts that he just drew stuff on. He drew one of my favorites was he drew this thing. He called it medieval Knievel, and it was a picture of a horse jumping off the end of a ramp with a knight on its back, and like it was jumping over cars. Medieval. I mean, it's just, who thinks it is crap? It's so funny. And so I just, when I made that logo, I was rocking Jack to sleep for his nap, and I back then. Oh my gosh, I don't know how your kids did, but when he, probably until he was 9 or 10 months old, if I remember this right, he would not nap on his own. The second he would touch his crib, he would wake up. I mean, I was pulling night shifts when he was first born and then sleeping for like 3 hours during the day. I mean, the kid would not sleep on his own for like 10 months. It was unreal. And so eventually all right, we're gonna watch movies. And man, I watched more movies than I ever have in my entire life. But I watched Oh Brother Where Art Thou. It is it is top three movies for sure. It's so hard to nail down like a top one, but I have a top five list. It changes pretty often. But Oh Brother Where Art Thou, definitely top three for me. And I'm just watching it, and it's the one of the funniest movies of all time. And then I'm a big like history and like Greek mythology nerd too, so of course the whole story of it is just an amazing story. But I'm just laughing and giggling the whole time, you know, rocking my son while he naps, and I just see the logo in my head, and I'm like, I gotta make it. And then I saw the logo, and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna make a concert poster. And then I mean, you just read the concert poster, and it's just crap that was in the movie, you know, like Papio Daniels' inauguration celebration. That was fun. I had a lot of fun with it, and it was just like one of those things that it's fun to do, because now that I had the skills that I know how to use, you know, InDesign and Illustrator and all that stuff, I can take these ideas and I can actually like bring them to life. And that's a big fun thing about what I do. And you know, I haven't been doing this long enough to be burnt out at all. Like I'm still like it really enjoying it. But from what everyone says, man, one of the keys to not burning out is just making stuff that you enjoy, making stuff that you love. And that has gotten more attention and more comments and more, you know, just, you know, I guess buzz than any other thing I've ever done. And it was just, yeah, it was just a silly, funny, stupid little thing that I've done.
That's so cool. Yeah, it's like it looks real too. And if you're unfamiliar with Oh Brother Where Art Thou, you'd be like, oh man, he Soggy Bottom Boys. That must be like you know, I don't know, some country singer's backup band. Like it's gotta be real.
Yeah.
So well done. Well done there.
Thank you.
Well, these conversations fly. They fly by, and we're already at the point where I need to
Mm,
ask you the final two parting questions, which are, what has been your greatest parenting success, and
mm,
what has been your greatest parenting failure and or learning?
mm. Yeah, so my biggest parenting success, this is a no-brainer for me. I think my wife and I talk about this at least once a week. I mentioned it a little bit before. Man, before we had Jack, we were we've always been happy in the sense that, we're a good fit. Like my wife and I love my wife to death. We've been together for 15, 16 years, something like that. I mean, we've been together for a long time, and we've become best friends, and we work really well together. And before we had Jack, she was a teacher, I was in social work, and we were your typical double income, no kids, family. We'd come home, and for the life of me, I can't remember what we used to do after work. I mean, I know what we do now. It's we're parents all the time, but like back then, I guess we'd get off work, come home, we'd go to the brewery, hang out with some friends or whatever, and we were happy, but we were both miserable at our jobs, just miserable. I mean, when I was in social work, man, being the assistant director, I had to have my phone on 24. I was on call 24/7. If something went wrong, I was the one that had to deal with it, and it was just. That gets old after a while. I mean, after about the fifth time you make dinner plans with your wife and you're on your way to dinner and your stupid phone rings, like that'll make you want to burn institutions to the ground. and um, so that it was like that all the time. Like we'd be at home watching TV, and my mind would be like on. It would be on, and just thinking like if I get a phone call, I have to jump into action. I may even have to go in. And my wife, if you I don't know how things are in Philly, but if you're anybody, at least in North Carolina, if I mentioned that my wife was a teacher in North Carolina, it's an instant groan. It's just an awful place to be a teacher, and there's not a teacher shortage. It's a shortage of master's level educated people that are okay for working for 30 grand a year. It's not a good situation. And so we were happy, but our lot we were just our job situation was miserable. Um, when we had Jack, my wife came to me with the idea of her staying home full time, and instantly I loved that idea. I was like, yes, please, this is gonna be great. I think at first the thought was, we're not gonna have to fool with childcare. We're not going to have to deal with trying to find somewhere that we trust and stuff like that. But then the conversation quickly turned to, my wife is gonna be a lot happier. I'm gonna be a lot happier. I mean, like people have to do childcare. That's fine. There's no shade on that at all. But like we love that we don't have to drop our son off with a stranger every day. Um, and like I mentioned before, like we don't make as much money as we did when we were both working, but man, if we're not just so much more happy, like we have to keep a close eye on the budget and stuff. But I mean, like, man, like my goodness, like my son gets to take a nap in his room every day. My son gets to have a home cooked meal, 5 times a day. I love that we're giving him this life, and also that this life is ours. I love that we made this sacrifice of, my wife's career and our money situation, but the payoff is just incalculable. We're like our son's happy. I mean, he laughs at his own farts. He's the best kid ever. He's happy and goofy and silly, and we get to be around it all the time, and he gets to be around us all the time. And so, I love that my wife partnered with me and that she had that vision and that we made it work. And prayer and faith have been a big part of it. We I love to say that we make it work, and we do. I work 12 hours 5 days a week. I work 8 hours, or I work 10 hours full time. Then I work on my freelance job, 2 hours a day, and Fridays 12 straight hours of freelance. Love freelance Fridays. And so yeah, we do work very hard and we make it work. But man, God's just he's kept the clients coming, and we haven't gone without at all, and we are happier than we've ever been. It's such a good life, man. I love it. Um, the biggest thing I've learned as far as like my failure, I would have to say that I'm not Superman. And I think, as a new dad, you see your wife recovering physically, you see your everything that goes into keeping a 2 week old blob of flesh breathing. It's really all they are. Like you just you gotta clean them and feed them, and they just exist. And that is some of the most hard work you've ever done. And so like instantly, my brain goes to, okay, like we're gonna take care of this kid. I'm gonna take care of my wife, and we're gonna do everything that we can to make sure that all this works. And I love doing that. I love being a dad. I love being a husband, but I am not as good as my wife is at noticing when I need a break. And my wife is very good at noticing that. There were a few times where she saw all over my face that I just needed a break, and she would come up to me and she go, "Hey, I've got Jack for a minute. Why don't you go? Take a breather. Why don't you go? Grab a drink with a buddy or something like that." And I just just making sure that I take some time to myself, and I've gotten better at that. My wife will ask me how I'm doing, and if I need a night with some buddies, I'll make sure that we set that up. But I just when you're not doing that, you do things like lay your baby down in his crib at 4 a.m. and you sneak out of the room, and then as soon as you shut the door, you hear him wake up. And I don't know, as a dad, if you've ever screamed silently, but oh my gosh, man, like the fit I can throw when I haven't had any sleep. And it's like I don't want to wake my wife up and I don't want to scare my son, but like it is arms flailing and just cursing and everything you can do as quietly as you can. And it's just like, okay, I might need a break. So, but yeah, just making sure that, man, parenting is no joke, and working full time is no joke. And even my wife, man, being at home with Jack by herself 12 hours every day, it's a lot of hard work. And so just making sure we do a good job of making sure that each other has what we need, and we do good check-ins with each other. But like I said, if it wasn't for her, I might not know that I need a break, because I'm just not good at recognizing that. So she's been really instrumental in helping me with that. So forever grateful for my wife.
Yeah. That's so cool. Yeah, it's like I've seen memes, videos, whatever, of a parent laying their child down in a crib as if the child is like a stack of dynamite. Cause like as soon as it touches, it just blows up and you're like,
Yeah.
ah.
Oh
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
gosh. Like,
One or
oh
two of our girls were like that at different points in their development cycle of sleep. Yeah,
yeah.
that's the worst.
Yeah. I mean, he's almost 2 now, and I think he's slept all the way through the night maybe 10 times his whole life. His whole life. Last week he slept through the night twice in 1 week. But that's what he does. I Man, if we're years in the future and you're listening to Jack, I love you, dude. But listen, you do this thing where you give us hope, right? You'll sleep through the night, and the next night you'll sleep pretty good, and then 2 nights later you'll sleep through the night again, and me and your mom will look at each other. We'll be like, "Is could this be? Could this be where we return to decent sleep?" And then we'll put him down. He'll wake up at 11. He'll wake up again at 2. He'll wake up again at 4. He'll wake up again at 5. And then now everything's awful. So I love you. Please sleep, son. Please. If you listen to this, I don't care if you're 18 years old. Go to bed right now just because you owe me.
I love it. I love it. Well, if folks want to find you online, follow you, reach out, any of that kind of stuff, where can they find you?
Yeah, I really only exist on Instagram. I keep my portfolio and my website up to date. So if you want to find me, there's really the two places to find me and keep up with me.
Awesome. Great. Thank you, Todd, for your time and sharing with us.
Yeah, man. Thank you for having me on. It's always a good time, man. I love talking about design. I love talking about being a dad, man. It's so much fun. So this was a good time. Thank you.
Yep.